If you heard the name Euphoric Brothers, you would probably think of the creators of the internet hit Garten of Banban. It has made them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars with its success. But if you look at the Euphoric Brothers Steam page, you will see a bunch of other games they made, all good in their own respect, but none of them gained attraction. So what made Garten of Banban so special? Why is the Euphoric Brothers' 10th game the one to blow up? How did they do it? And can you, yes, you, the viewer, make the next hit game with an extremely tight budget? This is the story of the Euphoric Brothers and how they got to their success. To understand and replicate their success, we'll first have to know their backstory. The story of the Euphoric Brothers starts on January 15, 2021, when they released a 2D game called Swallow the Blue, to mixed reviews to say the least. The game's story and quality is a whole can of worms in itself, so I won't be covering that. This was the start of a phase I'll call the 2D horror phase. After that, they released a few other games in the 2D horror phase, like Introvert, a teenager simulator. One of these 2D horror games, called He Needs His Medicine, actually got very positive reviews and holds some loyal fans to this day. After the 2D horror phase, they moved on to what I'll call the 2D casual phase. In this phase, they released 2 games, How We Got Here, which received pretty positive reviews, and Life on a Pizza, which was mixed to say the least. After realizing that the casual game genre wasn't for them, they came back to horror games. The next phase that I'll call the 2D horror revival phase was almost exactly the same as their other 2D games, and has nothing special to talk about. This phase lasted until the game Ekid Gumti, which is where the final and current phase of the Euphoric Brothers game development life is. I'd call it the 3D mascot horror game phase. As I said, they began this phase with their first mascot horror game, Ekid Gumti. This game actually has a pretty similar story to Garten of Banban, except with a different coat of paint. An orange coat of paint, you could say. The game is about a juvie detention center where everyone disappears, and you are hired by the father of one of the former inmates to discover what happened. Now, I hope you get my cringy coat of paint joke. Like I said, this game is basically Garten of Banban, but a bit more. I wouldn't call it dark, but ominous. But after that game, they released the game we know and love, Garten of Banban. I don't think I need to explain the story to you, since you've probably memorized it by now. So let's just jump into the juicy part and examine the first Banban game to see what they did differently. I believe that there are 5 components to Garten of Banban's success. The first one was YouTube, which is the most obvious. The brothers sent free copies of the game out to YouTubers like Super Horror Bro and Markiplier, all of whom have very loyal fan bases. This component also includes content farms, which while they ruin the game's reputation, they still inform people about the game's existence. The second component is the game being a mascot horror game. While this point might seem simple in theory, this is actually one of the most important reasons why the game blew up. It was released during the Poppy Playtime drought, and a mascot horror drought in general, where we were waiting for news on Chapter 3, and the game itself, which we are still doing today, by the way. The Euphoric Brothers saw this opportunity and swooped in, releasing the game on January 6th. The next component is its marketable characters. Banban has lots of characters to keep fans interested, like Jumbo Josh, Stinger Flynn, and Banban. Not much to note about this component, but it's still important to the game's success. The next component was the game's cliffhanger. They left fans in suspense so that they wanted more. The last component is the availability of the game. By releasing the first game for free and on mobile, they made the game almost impossible to ignore. This caused them to hook fans even further, to the point where they earned their trust. After gaining their trust, they would charge them more and more for each game without them even realizing. To remind you, even though the price of the 4th game is $10, nobody even brought it up, even though that price isn't cheap. By combining all of those factors, the Euphoric Brothers made a game with loyal fans who are willing to stick around, and by merge of characters, while also gaining constant publicity from YouTube. But now, you're probably asking, you said at the beginning of the video that I, the viewer, could make my own game, but I don't have a clue about game design, and don't know how to model. So how could I create my own game? 4 words for you: borrowing other people's work. Surprisingly, even with the amount of experience the brothers had, they still barely made the game themselves. Almost all of the models that they used were from online, as evident from the extremely long credits for such a small game. The only thing the brothers had to do on their end was to design and model the characters, draw the logo, and put it all together. And I also don't assume they had a high budget, meaning that almost anyone, including you, can make the next hit mascot horror game. Just make a free and easily accessible mascot horror game with lovable characters, using models from online. Learn a little bit of programming and modeling, create an interesting story, and send free copies of your game out to YouTubers. I know that might sound like a lot, but it's surprisingly simple for creating a viral game that the internet will love. I know there is probably a lot more that you would need to do, like legal stuff and other annoying things, but I wouldn't expect the entire process to take more than a month out of you. And to prove my point, the YouTuber Uniqueys created a remaster of Garten of Banban that some can argue is better than the base game in just a week, with no knowledge on how to code or program. And yeah, that's it. The full history of the Euphoric Brothers, how they carefully craft Garten of Banban to go viral, and how you can create the next mascot horror game all by yourself. I hope you consider subscribing, since I have recently been dedicating way too much time to YouTube, trying to release YouTube shorts every day, while also trying to make quality long-form videos like this one. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time.